From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and coming up on this week's Cattle Market segment, Oklahoma State University's Derrell Peel. He'll dig into the numbers from the USDA's monthly cattle on feed report and mid-year cattle inventory report, both of which were released on Friday. Also today, K-State's Casey Olson will report on the findings from the final year of his research trials on the effect of late-season prescribed burning on Sericea lespedeza in Kansas pastures. And now he's ready to research the practical application of this tactic in beef grazing programs. Later on this week's 4-H segment, K-State's Andrea Feldkamp talks about using county fair project work in readying for the upcoming new school year. All that and more right here on Agriculture Today.
Man, it's hot out here. Heat stress affects more than just humans. It also affects livestock. Extreme heat, humidity, wind speeds, and cloud cover all make a difference in air temperature. To control problems, make sure your livestock have shade and water provided at all times. This will help prevent problems in breeding, meat production, and reduce chances of death. Please take all these into consideration for livestock production. Brought to you by K-State Animal Science Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome to Agriculture Today. For our weekly cattle market segment, we turn to a livestock economist out of Oklahoma State University who's on the road today, but good enough to share a few thoughts with us in part about a host of USDA numbers just out. Derrell Peel with us. The fed cattle trade, the cash market, was very slow to come around until late Friday. It sounds that perhaps there was bullishness at the end, though.
It appears this market, certainly held its own and maybe even picked up a little bit on the late week trade. So, this market has been a very resilient thing all year. We've been sort of pleasantly surprised at the levels it was able to achieve. And even though we've come off of the earlier highs, we're still holding together pretty well for sort of the summer doldrums, every bit as much as expected, or if not better.
Might note, though, on the futures side, it was something of a roller coaster week last week. One day up, one day down, one day back up. The volatility seemed to be pretty prominent. It
really is, and of course that's been an underlying, kind of perpetual problem for quite some time, and I think that's really the majority of it. However, we had potential for scares this week. We had the announcement of the atypical BSE case in Alabama, what shouldn't have caused a lot of reaction, and as it turns out, really didn't cause a lot of problems, but futures markets kind of anticipate the worst, so that could have been part of the volatility as well. But it's just kind of the nature of the beast right now. These futures markets get very volatile, and that's a challenge for producers.
Before we dive into the USDA numbers, we might talk a bit about demand, and boxed beef has had a rough go of it for a while. That didn't come to an end last week, you say, but it has slowed down, so.
Well, we're looking for this boxed beef market to kind of find a bottom here. We came off of higher than expected highs, about a month ago. We have dropped sharply here into the summer. It's the summer doldrums. We expect some weakness once we get past 4th of July, and we've certainly seen that. But at the same time, it's really not unexpected, this kind of a pattern. And so I am looking for this market to kind of find a floor here and stabilize a little bit through the rest of the summer. We may see a little kick up here in August as we head towards a little bit of Labor Day featuring for the last grilling holiday of the year, and then typically we see a little recovery in the fourth quarter just because of the supply dynamics at that time of the year.
Looking forward to that. And on the other hand, we have seen exports doing well of late, and the May numbers came in from the USDA here just a few days back, and really reinforced what we've seen as far as solid export demand.
It has, the exports were still up in total year-over-year basis, not up as much as they have been, but still a very strong performance. It's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of who they're up. They're up mostly to the Asian markets by and large. We're struggling a little bit with Canada and a couple of other markets, but overall we're still up, and I think it is very robust. At the same time, we continue to see imports moderating. from Australia and most of our major suppliers. So the combination of less imports and more exports is really helping at the margin, really help the supply pressure of beef supplies in the U.S. market and in the domestic market.
Now to this pair of USDA reports, both released this past Friday afternoon. Let's start with the monthly Cattle on Feed report, which was the real bell ringer here, in that the placements number far exceeded expectations.
It really did. You know, the trade was looking for about a 6% increase year over year, and placements came in a 16% year over year increase. There'll probably be some reaction to that. This is the fourth month in a row of strong placements. I think it's important for people to look beyond that placement total. If you look at the weight breakdown of that, you see that an awful lot of that increase was in the very lightweight categories. Cattle under 600 pounds were up something like 29% year over year. And really what this is telling us is that feedlots have enjoyed great profitability in the last couple of months. Feedlots really can't stand having any money, so they got to spend it, and they've gone out and bought everything, including some lighter weight cattle. And so, the timing of these cattle is going to be spread out more than we would have seen a couple months ago when we were placing a much bigger proportion of the heavyweight cattle. So we're not necessarily creating a problem here because the placements are big, but they're going to be spread out over time. The other thing is that these placements probably won't continue at this pace. We've really pulled cattle ahead, particularly with these lightweight placements. We're placing them now. They won't be there to place later. So we won't see these kind of year-over-year increases in placements persist. We weren't surprised to see it this month, but I think we'll be surprised as we move on into the fall if we don't see these placements moderate significantly.
Just a quick footnote on that placements number. Did dry pasture conditions have anything to do with that? That is, pasture waning to the point where cattle were moved off early and into the feed yard?
It's entirely possible on a regional basis. Obviously, we've got some fairly serious drought conditions up in the northern plains. Most of those calves that, as far as cow-calf production, were really too light to go into the feedlot, although they might have. I know a lot of pairs have gotten split, and those lightweight calves are going somewhere, but they're probably going into backgrounding programs predominantly for now. Mm-hmm. But that said, I'm sure there were some bigger feeder cattle that were in part of that country, and so that may be contributing to this.
But your point is that one shouldn't read too much into that high placement number compared to the pre-report expectations, that this is really very much a matter of pulling cattle forward.
It is, and again, I think it's largely a function of the fact that feedlots had lots of money. They've got relatively cheap cost of gain, so they want to be loaded up and feed cattle. And then when you look at the timing implications of the weight breakdown, I don't see this as creating a serious problem. But that said, sometimes we look superficially kind of at the numbers, and this big placement number will probably raise some eyebrows here.
Yeah. What about that USDA cattle inventory report? Now, an important caveat here, this report has been reinstated after a 1-year absence. Therefore, there's no year-to-year comparison to 2016, directly anyway. That said, what did you take away from those numbers, Derrell?
Well, first of all, to your point, and I guess it's important to emphasize that the lack of consistency in this report over the last few years has made it very difficult to use this information. It really compromises the value when you don't get it on a consistent basis. But there's a couple things in this report that I think are indications of what we learned from it. If you compare historically the July inventory number, particularly for beef cows, to the January number, that gives you a basis of comparison. For this year, the July cow inventory number was 104% of the January beef cow inventory number. Historically, that has been about 101% in previous years. And if you go back and look at those years, anytime that number is over 102%, that typically happens when we are still in herd expansion. In fact, this is the biggest ratio of July to January going back to 1993, which was in the middle of the last full-blown expansion that we had in this industry. So what I take from that is kind of confirmation that we are still in some herd expansion in 2017. We still think it's going to be more modest than last year, but it would appear to suggest that we certainly are going to see a bigger cow herd inventory come January of 2018.
As well, Derrell, this report provided the first indication on the size of the 2017 calf crop directly. And what did that number tell us?
The number came in at 36.3 million head. That's up about 3.5% from 2016. We knew we would have a bigger calf crop. In fact, that percentage is about consistent with the herd expansion that we saw in 2016. So, again, no real surprise there, just kind of a confirmation of what we expected. I think what's important here, of course, is that with that bigger calf crop, we've got a pipeline that continues to grow of feeder cattle on into 2018, and by the time they come out of the feedlot and enter the beef supply, on into 2019. So this gives us an early estimate. We'll confirm it in January with the other report, but this really gives us a nice confirmation here mid-year. Calf crop is bigger.
But the takeaway here in the main is that there is, yes, growth in the beef cattle sector, but it is at a very modest pace, correct?
Well, I think so. Again, if you look at the beef heifer, replacement heifer inventory in this mid-year report, again, as a ratio to what it was in January, it's actually a very small ratio, which may indicate that we have slowed down heifer retention a little bit. And when you combine that with the fact that the cattle on feed report included quarterly estimates of steers and heifers on feed, the number of heifers on feed July 1 was up nearly 11%. Both of those things taken together give you a fairly consistent idea that we are not retaining as many heifers, and I think that's consistent with the idea, again, that we're slowing down this herd expansion probably in 2017, certainly going into 2018.
Any concluding thoughts here on the direction of the cash-fed cattle trade in this week ahead?
Well, again, this market, sort of continues to surprise us, particularly in light of the continued weakness in box beef. At some point, those two probably need to line up a little bit better, but if we see the box beef stabilize, then I think we're going to be content with the idea that this is kind of the summer doldrums. I wouldn't be surprised to see these fed cattle prices weaken a little bit more here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. As a part of those sort of summertime seasonal lows. But we may get through this and not lose very much of it, and then, we're probably looking for a little bit of strength after that.
All right. Well, thanks, as always, Derrell, for walking through all of this with us. We will talk again soon.
You're welcome.
Derrell Peel joining us on Agriculture Today, livestock economist out of Oklahoma State University. We will return shortly here on the K-State Radio Network.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
We're back now on this Agriculture Today. Now for you, an update on research work here at Kansas State University that has captured a fair amount of attention in the last couple of years because it could well be a practical option for controlling that noxious weed which has invaded so many grassland areas in Kansas, Sericea lespedeza. Along our way once again is animal scientist at Kansas State University, Casey Olson. Casey, the premise here, to remind folks, is the use of late-season pasture burning as one means of suppressing Sericea. And you've come upon some new data in addition to the previous in this last year of research in this area. But remind us of the concept, if you would.
Sure. We are rapidly coming to the end of our 4-year study in which we apply prescribed fire either in April, August, or September. We chose those off-season fire timings for a couple of reasons. We thought that August or September prescribed burning would be compatible with intensive early stocking as is practiced in the Flint Hills. And we were looking for a point of vulnerability with Sericea lespedeza. Many of you know that it flowers and sets its seed beginning in about mid-August and completing that process in late October. We believed that if we applied fire when the plant was physically vulnerable, that we could, at worst, set it back a little bit reproductively, and at best, bring it under a long-term control.
Just a quick recap of what you found out in those early trials as far as actual impact on Sericea plants
Sure.
with this bird?
And, I hope the folks aren't sick of me talking about this, but every year we've run the trial, something exciting has happened. Every year that fire touches Sericea in that August to September interval, it doesn't make seed. The plant basically resets itself, it regrows from the crown, and it just doesn't have time to reach reproductive maturity before frost kill. So we got that effect in year one and every year since. After 2 years of consecutive treatment, the dominance of Sericea lespedeza in the prairie canopy started to visibly fade. We were seeing less of the plant aerially. We call that measurement canopy frequency, for lack of a better term, but the strength of its canopy was diminishing. After 3 years of treatment, and this was really the acid test, you can only really define control, in my opinion, complete control, when the basal area of the plant or the number of plants starts to go down. Beginning in year 3, and we just completed the data analysis last week, we're at about 1.5% basal cover of Sericea lespedeza in our September treatment. We're at about 3.5% in our August treatment, and we're clear up to about 8% basal cover of Sericea lespedeza in our traditional April burn. We haven't used any herbicide on the study. That's just been fire.
Right.
But you can go out and look at those plots today without having any prior knowledge of what treatment has been applied, and you can visually tell the difference. I call them plots. They're about 15 acres apiece, so they're decent sized. But the effects are visibly obvious.
So the biomass of Sericea is shrinking. There's no question.
There's no question. And as kind of an afterthought, this summer we added an additional measurement. We've heard people express concern that what does late season burning do to the plants that we're trying to manage for, that we want to keep? It doesn't change anything about the character of our big 4 tall grasses. They have been very constant throughout the study. Doesn't change bare soil, doesn't change litter cover, doesn't change overall basal plant cover. Those things are the same when we measure them in July. What does change? Okay, Sericea lespedeza is starting to go away, along with a couple of other problem plants, that we sometimes wrestle with, Baldwin's ironweed and western ragweed, the perennial ragweed. Those are also diminishing. Some of the things that we're getting back as we reclaim space that was occupied by Sericea lespedeza are these little wildflowers. I have a term of my own coinage called a functional forb. A forb that's either a legume or it's a nectar bearer in some way and critical for wildlife habitat. Well, we're getting more of those plants back late season burns than we are in our conventionally managed fire areas. The measurement that we added, we just wanted to see how much total biomass was represented by Sericea lespedeza when we measure it here, what should be its peak. All 3 of our treatments have the same amount of biomass in July, right at about 4,000 pounds per acre. But when we go in there and we parse Sericea biomass and all other forage biomass, we found something very interesting. And this is, again, after 4 years of treatment, 900 kilos of forage biomass in July is made up of Sericea lespedeza in our conventional burns, whereas in August, 400 pounds, or about 10%, is made up of Sericea, and in our September burn, about 86 kilos of forage dry matter per hectare is in Sericea lespedeza, and the other 3,900 kilos per hectare is made up of non-Sericea biomass. And that's a very satisfying cleanup number to think about.
The numbers you're sharing here, which certainly lend to the thought that this could hold great promise in dealing with Sericea, they're a result of cumulative burns over several years now,
yes.
Right? Not a single burn, right?
I talked to many people over the last year that are at a point of desperation dealing with Sericea. They're tired of repeated herbicide applications and the expense and the time that goes in with that. Burning's a whole lot more inexpensive option. It's a whole lot more time-effective option, but you can't expect miracles with 1 year of treatment. It's the result of just a change in management paradigm. What happens, for example, if we go back to a conventional fire treatment on some of these areas? I'm guessing the Sericea is going to show back up. But with a long-term change in thinking, a long-term change in management practice, I can say this confidently, that we have naturalized the plant to our environment. We're taking some of the smoke out of the month of April. Some of our neighbors might like that. We're at least providing an opportunity for ranchers to take some time burden off of the spring and move it to a different time of the year. And for cow-calf producers, particularly with our August burn treatment, we're giving them the capability to create a much more nutritious forage base that's based on regrowth, post-fire regrowth going into the fall and winter months.
Is the next step then here, Casey, to look at how this practice can be more successfully incorporated into production systems, not only for control of Sericea, but for the economic well-being of the operation itself?
Absolutely. The one piece of information that we were not able to get from this study, because it's a small-scale study, is what do these different burn regimes do to livestock performance? How do they change the flow of events, the typical flow of events for a land manager or a livestock manager out there in the Flint Hills? We would very much like to spend the next 4 to 6 years doing that research and looking for opportunities to find out, how is stocker calf performance affected when we move our burn interval from April to August or September? How does it work logistically in a cow-calf operation where you have multiple burn regimes and you use fire to not only control Sericea lespedeza but create better forage quality for those cows that are going to be around for the entire year? This is a big question. It's a simple question to ask, but it's a big question. It's going to be an expensive question to fully flesh out.
But you are, as a matter of fact, going to be at the core of a special meeting here on campus next week to try to drum up interest in that next step, are you not?
I am. And, the reason that that meeting is on our campus is that it's our problem. We own it. When you talk about Sericea lespedeza as a noxious weed, as a landscape killer, most of the rest of the country doesn't get it.
It was originated as a ground cover.
Sure.
As a matter of fact.
It's actually a cultivated bred forage plant in some parts of the U.S. It doesn't grow very well further west of Kansas because of dryness. It's our problem. We own it, and Kansans need to work to solve it.
We're looking forward to the next phase of this research coming together here in the not-too-distant future. But congratulations, Casey, on what you've discovered now and confirmed over multiple years. We appreciate your time once again, and best of luck with this meeting next week in talking about the next phase.
Thank you, Eric.
Casey Olson with us here on Agriculture Today. He's an animal scientist at K-State, and once more, they are wrapping up this multi-year study and using late-season burning as a means of suppressing Sericea lespedeza growth in Kansas pasture lands. And that work has met with resounding results and success in accomplishing that very goal. We will stand aside for a few moments now. When we return, today's agricultural news headlines are coming your way. Also, with this week's edition of Tree Tales, K-State forester Ryan Armbrust will join us. Once more, K-State's Andrea Feldkamp will be along for this week's 4-H segment, which will conclude with the rundown on the county fair schedule for this week around Kansas. All that still to come here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here as we move on now to today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, as Oklahoma State's Derrell alluded to in our cattle market segment earlier, the USDA Cattle on Feed report Friday surprised a lot of trade analysts. Live cattle futures, by the way, reacting bearishly this morning, as you'd expect. The USDA's Gary Crawford sums up that report.
How would you describe Friday's USDA Cattle on Feed report?
Rather bearish.
USDA livestock analyst Shale Shagam. Trade analysts have been expecting June placements into feedlots to be about 6% higher than June a year ago. USDA putting the number 16% higher at almost 1.8 million head, highest in 16 years, taking total feedlot inventories up to 12.8 million head, up 6% from a year ago. One reason for the surge in placements:
drought conditions in the northern plains, which likely is resulting in a larger number of animals being taken off of grass due to the lack of availability of forage and being put into feedlots.
And it shows in the state placement numbers. Minnesota placements up 25% from a year ago, Iowa 33%, and
South Dakota especially is noticeable at about 67% above a year earlier.
And when all these cattle start coming out of feedlots late this year and early next,
that will definitely have some price-depressing impacts.
Shagam says fed cattle prices, which have been running above year-earlier levels, could move below the line by early next year. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
As for the numbers out of Kansas feedlots, with, again, capacities of 1,000 head or more, the cattle on feed number for Kansas, 2.19 million head as of July the 1st. That inventory was up 7% from last year. Placements in Kansas feedlots during June, 395,000 head, up 13% from last year, and the fed cattle marketings for the month in the state totaling 465,000 head, up 3% from last year. Chinese negotiators last week characterized high-level U.S.-China trade talks as positive, saying the two sides were cooperating to narrow the $347 billion trade deficit the U.S. has with China. The negotiators said that Beijing would work with the U.S. on priorities, including expanding services trade with the U.S., reducing excess capacity in its steel industry, and boosting agricultural imports. That, according to a lengthy statement released by the Chinese embassy in Washington. It was not clear whether these were new pledges or restatements of past positions. U.S. officials did not immediately comment on the Chinese statement. A day earlier, they had issued only a terse statement. On Wednesday, Chinese officials in Beijing painted a rosier picture of Wednesday's talks, one describing them as innovative, practical, and constructive. The differing responses appear to reflect the political objectives of the two nations, that according to a China scholar at Cornell University, Eswar Prasad. He says that Beijing wants to show it can keep U.S.-China relations on an even keel before a Communist Party conference this fall, where the senior leadership will be chosen. Prasad said the statement is meant for the audience back home, as he put it. The U.S. administration has a different purpose, showing that it can make progress in reducing the trade deficit. It's unclear which side has the upper hand in future talks. The most contentious issues involve the trade deficit and Chinese steel overcapacity. China's embassy said the two sides agreed that reducing the deficit was a priority for both nations, and they would step up cooperation, manage differences, and conduct constructive cooperation, as they put it. They didn't offer anything concrete beyond that. On agriculture, the Chinese said the two sides discussed several steps, including China lifting its 2-year-old avian influenza-related ban on U.S. poultry meat. The American poultry industry has pushed China to tailor such bans regionally as opposed to universal bans, and have set up visits for Chinese officials to tour U.S. plants. Officials from the two countries also discussed China's economic restrictions on some U.S. grain products and exports of Chinese dairy products to the U.S., that according to the Chinese statement. And the proposed rewrite of the Waters of the U.S. rule is on tap to be released in December, but it's not clear from the federal regulatory agenda exactly when that will be finalized. The rule to clarify the scope of the Clean Water Act and repeal the WOTUS rule could come in December, according to a listing in the Unified Agenda released by the Trump administration late last week. The process is a two-step effort. The first step came last month with the proposed rule to repeal the rule. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and now it's on to the weekly feature from the Kansas Forest Service at K-State. Tree Tales. Awaiting with that is K-State Forester Ryan Armbrust. Ryan?
Bagworms are a perennial issue here in Kansas, especially on our conifers like red cedar. But by the time most folks notice the cone-like bags hanging off their trees, it's too late to start spraying. Like most pests, some background on the life cycle of the bagworm will help you more effectively understand how and when to control it. Bagworms are related to moths and cause damage only in the larval stage. In the spring, overwintered eggs hatch, and small larvae begin to feed on leaves and needles of the tree that they are in. At this stage, they're called crawlers, and they are most easily controlled. After the larvae begin to form a protective casing of plant debris, the bag that gives them their name, they are much more difficult to control. Many insecticides are labeled to control bagworms, but timing and coverage must be carefully planned to ensure effectiveness. Bagworms are best controlled by timing sprays to May or June, depending on how early spring arrived. When bagworms are in the crawler stage, just a fraction of an inch long, they are most sensitive to chemical control. Full coverage, including penetrating the tree's interior canopy, is needed. Low-pressure, consumer-grade sprayers are not usually adequate, and commercial treatment may be more effective. Unfortunately, once these pests are hunkered down in their protective cocoons, they are largely protected from any chemical treatment options that we may attempt to control them with. Hand-picking the bags from trees in winter is an effective control strategy, especially for smaller trees, shrubs, and localized infestations. Obviously, removing bags from an entire windbreak is not feasible. These bags can be tossed in a bucket of soapy water, which kills the overwintering eggs within the bag. Complete removal of all bags from the tree is critical to limiting the population, as each bag may contain hundreds of eggs. Bagworm populations are dependent on environmental factors, including bird populations that feed on adult bagworm moths, and therefore experience population peaks and valleys. Bagworm infestations may be severe for several years, only to subsequently drop below damaging level for several years, giving trees time to recover, which they often do. While conifers are often the most severely impacted, and sometimes killed outright by large infestations of bagworms, deciduous broadleaf trees can usually recover from the defoliation stress that bagworms cause. I'm Ryan Armbrust, Forest Health and Conservation Forester with the Kansas Forest Service, and this has been another Tree Tale.
Thanks, Ryan, and we'll be back shortly. This is Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Coming your way now on Agriculture Today, this week's Kansas 4-H feature. We're right in the thick of county fair activity around Kansas. Our guest now wants to bring to the attention of 4-Hers, it won't be all that long until the new school year begins, and so one might be thinking about readying for that. Andrea Feldkamp is with us. She is the 4-H Family and Consumer Sciences Program Liaison with K-State Research and Extension, and you want young people to start orienting in that direction, Andrea. And one of the things that you would suggest is that young people use their 4-H experiences in readying their projects, so forth, to actually sharpen up on their school skills.
Indeed. So the summertime, oftentimes there's what's called a summer slide, which is a time when some backtracking goes on in the math and the reading area as far as skills are concerned. So brush up on those skills by measuring those ingredients for those fair brownies, or maybe even reviewing the instructions on building that bookshelf for your woodworking project to help review vocabulary and also reinforce your math skills. So kind of review some of those things so you'll be ready to roll and learn more once you get back on that first day. Another thing to also maybe inventory or check out is your closet. So it might be time to clean that closet or maybe your room. Likely you have grown. I recommend trying on all clothing and removing items that no longer fit. This is a perfect time to do this project, especially if you happen to participate in the clothing buymanship project, because there may be some things that could go with an outfit or a garment that you've purchased and plan on using for that, so you can recycle some of those items and also purchase those items that you need that you now no longer can fit into because you're taller. So you now know this, of course, because you have sorted through your closet, right?
Right. That's the step one.
So another thing to think about is, where will you study? A study environment is a good thing to set up now. So what do you prefer for your study environment? Do you want some natural light from some windows? Are you more into some artificial light? Consider what space makes most invitation for you to encourage you to use it in study, because success in school can only happen if you dedicate time at home. Need some ideas for a study space? The Home Environment Project has many great resources for you to consider.
So there's another project tie-in that works for the purpose here. Nutrition is important, of course, and 4-H nutritional programs can lend to that aspect as young folks start thinking in that direction ahead of the school year, right?
Indeed, yes. So a lot of things that trip people up is that morning time. People are busy, they're rushing, trying to get out the door. So what will you eat for breakfast? Are you a person that prefers to eat before you head out the door, or do you need a little bit more time to wake up? Maybe if you're on the bus, maybe you want to take something with you that you can eat on the bus, or something that you can eat at school if that works in your time and schedule. When and where you eat will determine what items are more convenient. So remember to include all your macronutrient groups, the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the fats in your choices. And of course, stay hydrated with a water bottle. You can check out the Foods and Nutrition Project resources for some additional resources on or recipe ideas to get you going on your mornings.
Mm-hmm. And health dovetails with that, obviously, likewise. And the Health and Wellness Project within Kansas 4-H can lend some direction there, too.
Yes. So most folks don't consider sleep an attribute of health. But, Eric, it's a critical attribute and one that our youth often don't get enough of. So adequate amounts of sleep vary per individual, but about a week prior to the first day of school, I recommend hitting the pillow a little earlier in the evening. And you can gradually taper off your bedtime so that you move it up a little bit each night. This will help prepare you for the earlier morning wake-ups instead of having just the shock of going to bed your normal late time and then being expected to wake up maybe 2 or 3 hours earlier than you have been accustomed to in the summer. So other health and wellness tips are definitely found within our Health and Wellness Project resources.
The overall point here that you're expressing, Andrea, is that 4-H project experiences and skills can help one ready for that school year. So put it all together that way.
Indeed. 4-H projects are year-long. The fair days will soon be over. They're pretty short-lived, but the 4-H project skills that have been learned will continue to serve you well as you transition back to school. So perhaps the most important project is a purple ribbon school year.
Well put. Good ideas all. Andrea, thanks for passing these along to our 4-H young people.
You're welcome.
Andrea Feldkamp is the 4-H Family and Consumer Sciences Program Liaison with K-State Research and Extension. That is this week's Kansas 4-H segment. We'll conclude this Agriculture Today with our rundown of the county fairs on the slate for this week. Concluding today, the Stanton County Fair at Johnson City, the Reno County Fair at Hutchinson, the Ford County Fair at Dodge City, Neosho County Fair at Erie, and the McPherson County Fair at McPherson, all finishing up today. Other fairs underway, the Geary County Fair at Junction City, concluding Thursday, and the Hamilton County Fair at Syracuse, Labette County Fair at Oswego, Miami County Fair at Paola, and Stevens County Fair at Hugoton, all concluding Saturday. These fairs open today: the Ellsworth County Fair at Ellsworth through Thursday, the Doniphan County Fair at Troy, the Meade County Fair at Meade, and the Thomas County Fair at Colby, all through Friday, the Cherokee County Fair at Columbus, the Douglas County Fair at Lawrence, the Norton County Fair at Norton, and the Anderson County Fair at Garnett, all running through Saturday. Starting tomorrow, running through Friday, the Russell County Fair at Russell. Also opening tomorrow, running through Saturday, the Cloud County Fair at Concordia and the Leavenworth County Fair at Tonganoxie. Starting Wednesday, running through Saturday, the Ness County Fair at Ness City, the Pawnee County Fair at Larned, and the Wichita County Fair at Leoti. Opening Wednesday, running through Sunday, the Kingman County Fair at Kingman and the Finney County Fair at Garden City. Starting Wednesday, running through next Monday, the Wilson County Fair at Fredonia. Then, beginning Thursday, running through Saturday, the Marion County Fair at Hillsboro, the Mitchell County Fair at Beloit, and the Wallace County Fair at Sharon Springs. Opening Thursday, running through Sunday, the Barber County Fair at Hartner. Starting Thursday, running through Monday, the Allen County Fair at Iola, Montgomery County Fair at Independence, Morris County Fair at Council Grove, Osborne County Fair at Osborne, and Riley County Fair at Manhattan. Beginning Friday, running through Sunday, the Greenwood County Fair at Eureka and the Nemaha County Fair at Seneca. And opening Friday, running through Tuesday, August the 1st, the Phillips County Fair at Phillipsburg and the Wabaunsee County Fair at Alma. Starting Friday, running through Thursday, August the 3rd, the Graham County Fair at Hill City. And opening this weekend, the Butler County Fair at El Dorado, the Sherman County Fair at Goodland, and the Chase County Fair at Cottonwood Falls. Again, get out and support your county fair with your attendance and participation. And thanks for listening in today. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.